Okay, let's go ahead and start. Welcome. You are about to view a special education professional development screencast. This is what we presented to staff on August 18th, 2020, and we will be coming to Tonganoxie schools to do the same. This screencast is for those of you who are not able to join us, or it is also for reference to people who did join us and they want to come back and view some specifics. So our agenda is as follows: Brightsped updates, file review results, how to use DocHub, and then IEP guidance for addressing alternative learning environments or change to a student's schedule. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we have Brightsped updates.
All
Jennifer,
right. That's me, Donna. So I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
All right. So the first of the updates is this lovely little signature box that shows up on your forms. For now, please ignore this box. It won't do anything. And when you print this document, it doesn't show up. When you do go to print this document, one of the other updates is you now can email your forms through Brightsped. So when you click print, it gives you the option to send to email. And then you can put your email information here to the return email, so it will send a record to you, your subject, and you can use the upload to attach other forms to this, like if you were sending a notice of meeting and you wanted to attach parental rights with that. Another update we have in Brightsped is on the goal page. And you will notice that we have the new box for evaluation procedures. Yay, very exciting. We also have this button next to our state standards that says view. If you go there, you'll notice that it has standards listed here. They do have them for math and for English. You can select these and put them in your state standard, but it only gives you the numbers and not the words. So you can do this and then go copy and paste the wording in, or you can continue to do what we've done in the past, which is go to your standards document and copy and paste there. So that's kind of a couple of optional ways to do that. And I think that's all of the updates. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and back to Donna. Oh, there are two things I didn't talk about. I apologize. The correct IEP year and no archiving. You guys will see that there is no option on your IEP to change from one year to the next. It will only let you be in the most current year, so that's a great thing for case managers. And you no longer have to archive your IEP. We're working on some more guidance for that, but it's not something that you have to do after you've completed an IEP.
To our next subject.
Donna, you're muted still.
Thank you. Okay, our next subject is file review, and Jennifer will take us through the file review.
Okay, so we were up for a file review this year, and as part of that, we had a random selection from Kansas State Department of Education of files that we were to review. Part of that review is 22 questions, which cover these areas: Part C, transition, parent rights, participation, meeting notice, IEP team meeting, placement, content of the IEP, and IEP amendment notice and consent. So how did we do on these areas? The next slide. We did really well with 3 of them, and then there were 4 where we had some areas of concern, some minor, some that we need to practice up on. So we're going to go through those areas right now. The first up is meeting notice. So there are 4 areas to this: the purpose, time, location of meeting, and the next 2 we really had some problems on, but fairly minor. The last bullet here, notice given to both parents, was probably the primary area of concern. So the first thing that you need to know about this is that if the notice was not sent to both of the child's parents, that we have to have some justification for that. On the next slide, it shows you where we would put that justification. Am I echoing? No. So if we have justification for that, then you would put it on the comment area on the IEP participants page. If you click on comments right there, then it will give you just a box where you can put information in regarding why that other parent did not get a notice of meeting. It does print with the IEP, so it's right there next to participants. The next area is required members of the IEP team. The quick fix for this is that on the IEP participants page, there is, it's not on the next slide, there is a button that you can click that indicates that you can auto-fill all the required IEP team members.
Participant defaults. Participant defaults. That's what it's.
Thank you, Allison. We're not going to show that, so I'm going to go to the next slide. The next area under consideration was placement. So we made some changes to BrightSped to accommodate this a little bit. It's still under development, so stay tuned. The next slide. When you get to the placement considerations, under selected decisions, it lists several areas that you could consider. We are, again, in development with BrightSped to edit this so that it's only harmful effects that you are considering at this time in this section. So for gifted, for example, because harmful effects isn't something that you consider, this would be for gifted only, no harmful effects considered. So only students with gifted as their exceptionality would choose that. And then there were also asking that an other box be added so that perhaps it's not an exhaustive list of harmful effects. You can add one more specific to that child's needs. In addition to this section on the IEP in BrightSped, it's also on our prior written notice. So it's box 5 on the prior written notice. And so on this section, again, it's really important to consider individually the harmful effects associated with that student. You look back at what you propose to determine how that affects the student. This, what you put on the prior written notice, number 5, should also align with what you selected and put on the IEP. Okay. Content of the IEP was the next area. So you can see there were 5 areas here, and 4 of them we had some fix in BrightSped to help you with that compliance component. Academic achievement and functional performance are the first areas. So again, in development, coming soon, in the academic area, if an area is not selected, then it'll say in the header that this is not an area of concern. The next area is functional performance, and this is actually present right now. So if the student does not have any functional concerns, then there is a box that you can click and it will print on the IEP that the team considered the functional performance of this student and determined that there were no needs. Impact of exceptionality. So this is how the child's disability or giftedness affects the child's involvement, access to, and progress in the general education curriculum. So some things to consider are what is different from typical peers that is a result of the exceptionality. How does that impact access to curriculum? How does that impact progress in the general curriculum? I think the major takeaway for this section is that this is important information, and it's in bold at the bottom of this slide, to help get away from being the tutoring SPED teacher or the homework helper. So it helps us to dig deep enough to understand where the specialized instruction will make a difference for each student. We need to drill down within the areas of impact to be able to target student needs. So consider those things when you are developing your impact of exceptionality in BrightSped on each student's IEP. Progress toward meeting annual goals. Allison already addressed this in our BrightSped update. Basically, some of you did a fantastic job of embedding this in your goals or where you put the standard associated, but now it has a dedicated box for evaluation procedure. If participating in the alternate assessment, this is an area that is in development with BrightSped, hopefully we'll be there soon. But if you have a student participating in the dynamic learning maps or the alternate assessment, we have to explain why the student is taking the dynamic learning map for the selected content and why the general assessment is not appropriate. So again, that's only limited to those who are qualified to take the DLM, but that is in development and should be part of our IEPs. Next, we get to DocHub. And DocHub is a new feature that we have added that's in addition to BrightSped. It's a program that you have all received an email invitation at this point, and we're gonna make a different quick video to show you the ins and outs of DocHub and how to use that. Just a quick overview is that I wanna assure you that it's pretty easy to use. It has unlimited documents. You have this for a year, our subscriptions for a year, so you don't have to worry about that. Unlimited sign requests, you can see this, up to 30 email recipients per sent email. So there's no worry that you're not gonna have enough space or it's going to only allow 3 users. It allows many. So this is a solution, especially when we're conducting IEPs via Zoom, that we can automatically get those signatures from parents in a pretty quick and easy way.
Okay, we are going to transition now to what should happen if services need to change in the learning environment. We have parents who are choosing remote learning. We have parents who are choosing Basler Linwood Virtual School. And then we have schedule changes that are occurring in many buildings because of how we're providing education to students. There are elementaries that will have 4 days a week with 1 day for remote, and then the middle school and high school in Basler will have 2-day-a-week in-person services and the remainder remote. So our IEPs are written for a typical school environment, and we're no longer going to be in that environment. So changes may need to occur due to these factors. Schedule changes designed to keep students safe, that is temporary, and then services can't be provided as written in the parent's chosen learning option. So if the change is temporary, a contingency plan must be developed. KSDE has given us some guidance on this. We have an FAQ that is updated regularly. The last update was August 10th, and this is the 3rd update so far. Then documenting frequency, location, and duration of accommodations and modifications. There's a guidance document for that. And then there's also a guidance document for Medicaid in the COVID environment. So these are all links and should take you to the most recent updates of any of these documents. So right now we're going to go to the link that shows the special education, Kansas State Department of Guidance, education guidance for compliance with IDEA during reopening schools during the COVID pandemic. So there are all kinds of question and answers here. And I would encourage you to read through this. If you have questions of anything that you find here, please feel free to reach out and ask those questions. And we'll try, if we don't know the answer to that, we will try to find it for you. But a lot of our guidance for what we are giving you now comes from this specific document. We are interpreting this document. We are asking for clarification from KSDE Legal, Special Education Legal Team. So we feel like what we are providing you with, this information, is what needs to happen legally for all of our students during this school year. The next one, frequency, location, duration of accommodations and modifications. So we have been told that the State Department would like for us to make our IEPs more flexible, not just because of COVID, but they feel like we need to be more flexible in our IEP writing so that we don't have to revisit this IEP quite as often during the school year. As you know, sometimes we write 2 or 3 IEPs on a student. So if we are making things a little more flexible, it might prevent us from having to rewrite an IEP. But as you are working on your contingency plans, we still need to have frequency, location, and duration on our services, our accommodations, our modifications, and that type of thing. So this shows us how we can write those. The projected start date, if you see here, the State Department is telling us we no longer have to have an actual date. What is needed for services is an actual date because of the way we write our services. Our anticipated services chart is part of the IEP. So that gets uploaded to SpedPro. So we do have to have a date in our IEP. But when we're talking about our contingency plan, we can also be using this. And from now on, it sounds as though we can use this language for a projected start date for accommodations and modifications. So they're telling us to just use the language first day of the first day of school for the 2020-2021 school year. So that's the language that can be used on all of these. So you could take a look at the accommodations and modifications that they have here for remote learning and for a hybrid model. Just may help you think through what could be applicable in a remote setting and what could be applicable in a hybrid setting. And then for those of you who bill Medicaid, there is a fact sheet on school-based Medicaid, frequently asked questions, COVID-19 update, and that's for this month of August. Okay, from that first document that I showed, the KSDE guidance for compliance with IDEA, this statement, we altered it just a little bit, but the statement is taken from that document. The services and supports in a child's IEP most likely contemplated the traditional education environment, which most students are no longer in. We may have some students that are in a regular setting. I know Tonganoxie Elementary and middle and high school, you're not starting in a remote setting. Although some schedule changes may be different, it is a traditional educational environment. So the changes you're making are likely due to schedule changes. The child's IEP team should start by thinking about the district's general education curriculum in place at this time through the different learning environments the district is offering, such as hybrid, remote, or virtual learning. All services and supports are intended to support the child in accessing the general education curriculum with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate. The child's IEP team should develop a plan for temporary services. This temporary plan should be designed to enable the child to advance appropriately toward attaining the child's annual goals, to be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum. So in this instance, the district's general education curriculum available to all students within a given learning environment, or appropriate activities for children ages 3 to 5. To participate in extracurricular and other non-academic activities, and to be educated and participate with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate in all of these activities. So in this instance, to participate in the remote learning environment with their non-disabled peers. Okay, so where do I start? Sounds like lots of paperwork to do. And unfortunately, that is the name of the game with special education. So the first thing you want to do is each provider, you're going to need to look at the services in your IEP that you have for your students. So if you're a speech path, if you are an OT, if you are a teacher, you are going to look at those services, accommodations, and modifications as written, and see if those services can be provided in the student's current learning environment without any change. If yes, you can provide those services as written. No action is required at this time. Eventually, though, you will have to write a contingency plan for remote learning for all of your students. And that's because at some point in time during the school year, we may have to revert very quickly to remote learning for everyone. So it's a good idea to be prepared for that and have a plan in place. If you cannot provide those services as written, then a contingency plan and a prior written notice need to be developed. We're going to give you the instructions on the next slide. So number 2, if the student will be in person for instruction, will the student's schedule need to be altered for safety reasons? Or has the district changed the building schedule due to safety concerns? If yes, a contingency plan and prior written notice need to be developed. If no, no action is required at this time. A contingency plan for remote learning will need to be added at some point. And then number 3, will the student continue to require a behavior plan, assistive technology, etc., as written in this IEP environment? We could also add accommodations and modifications to that particular question that you're asking yourself. If yes, no action is required at this time. A contingency plan must be written, but if no, a contingency plan and prior written notice need to be developed. Okay, so this is each provider is thinking about these things to begin. Now, what do we do? After we've thought about these for each of our students, all providers on that student IEP should work together and give input into what services, accommodations, modifications, etc., can be provided or make sense in the learning environment. So you're going to come up with a proposal for the parent. And now comes the time that you will need to amend the IEP. We want to preserve our offer of FAPE to the parent, so we're preserving the IEP, and the amendment is to add a contingency plan that is temporary, and it's flexible in its wording so that we can go back and forth between learning environments whenever we need to. We don't want to have to do a new contingency plan and a new notice of meeting and amendment and everything every time we have to change learning environments throughout the school year, because we may be going back and forth several times. So to try to cut out that amount of paperwork, these are the things that we're asking you to do. So now that you've gotten with all the providers together, the case manager will contact the parent to let them know the IEP must be amended with a contingency plan outlining services to address adjustments in the learning environment. Do they want a Zoom IEP meeting to provide input and discuss the plan? So do they want an amendment with a meeting? We always have to offer the parent an amendment with a meeting. So the items needed if they want a meeting is a notice of meeting, and that's a 10-day notice. So that's a notice of meeting, but you can ask the parent if they will waive their right to the 10 days. Then you'll also need an amendment form, a prior written notice, and a contingency plan. Okay, if they are comfortable providing their input during this phone call without an IEP meeting, so an amendment without a meeting, the items that you would need would be an amendment, a prior written notice, and a contingency plan. So what do those look like? What do they need to have included in them? So for the notice of meeting, you're going to ask the parents if they will waive their right to a 10-day notice. Most parents will not have a problem with that. They understand the urgency of trying to get a plan in place. If so, make sure that it is indicated on the notice of meeting and use DocHub to obtain the signature. You will invite both parents and the student if turning 14 during the IEP year. Invite all members of the IEP team, that would be all required members of the IEP team. If a general education teacher is not available, get an excusal and written input. If you need an LEA because your building administrators are not available, consider your school psych, your building counselor, Allison, Jennifer, or I. The amendment form. You're going to add the following information. Add contingency plan as written and attached to this document, effective, and then you're going to put the date. And it can be a flexible date. So if you're just adding a contingency plan for remote later on down the road, the effectiveness of the document would be today's date, but it wouldn't go into effect until remote learning was required of all students. So then you're also going to add this blurb. The changes to services, accommodations, modifications, and other supplementary aids and services in this contingency plan are temporary and intended to meet the needs of, and you'll write the student name, while in the learning environment. These temporary services will end upon the district's return to a normal schedule, typical pre-pandemic school day. And the services outlined in the original IEP, dated, you'll put the date, will resume as written without additional notice, meeting, or consent. And then you will obtain a signature through DocHub, and the parent on the amendment form can choose the option of give consent or do not give consent. But if we have asked for the parent input into the contingency plan, then we should not have a problem with parents not consenting. Do we want to show that amendment form right now, Allison?
I can show the amendment form and the contingency plan. Let me share my screen here.
Okay.
I have both of those pulled up here in Brightsped. Let's see. Here's the contingency plan. Let me first show the amendment form.
And we'll talk about the contingency plan after Allison shows it to you.
Yeah. So amendment form, again, is just in your list of documents. IEP amendment form. It's very simple, and this is the blank where you would put in that information about adding the contingency plan, just right here in this blank. And then the parents agree or disagree to amend the students. That's their giving consent, and they do or do not wish to have a meeting. And it has to be signed by the parent and by the LEA. So let me show you the contingency learning plan. That same information right here at the top of this form about how the services are in this contingency plan are temporary and intended to meet the needs of your student. Then you can pick the learning environment chosen by the parent, might be on-site or remote. And then there's a place for the description of the services and a place for the description of the services should the entire school district go to remote. So it is kind of a two-part plan. And I'm gonna let Donna give you more information about that. Back to you, Donna.
All right. All right, for the contingency plan as Allison showed you is in Brightsped, and you're going to indicate the parent choice for learning option. So if the parent, there's a couple things to consider here as well. If the parent has chosen remote or virtual and the team believes some services need to be in person, the team should indicate that in the plan. If the parent refuses consent to bring the student in for those services, you'll indicate that on the prior written notice. But some of you may believe, your teams may believe that your services cannot be provided effectively and with fidelity in the remote environment or in a virtual setting. So you would want to indicate if you wanted the parent to bring the student in. You will indicate services, accommodations, modifications, supplementary aids and services with frequency, location, and duration. The date is at the top of that contingency plan. So it's in a pre-filled narrative, so you will not have to rewrite it for each service. You'll just be doing frequency, location, and duration. Okay, prior written notice for identification and placement. We're going to take a look at I Am a Fake. I'll let Allison pull that one up.
Yep, that's back to me here. Let me,
If you pull it up, I can chat about it.
sure.
Okay.
Let me get to I'm a Fake here.
Do you see where she went to documentation? And that's where you're going to find this document.
And I need to find which one it is. So hang on.
And I believe.
Is it this one?
Mm-hmm.
I hope so. I don't know.
That looks a little wonky. I'm sure that will be fixed momentarily, but the bulk of what we really wanted to show you here is the language that we were using.
This is not the right one.
Oh, that's not the right one.
I apologize for not having that already pulled up.
You know what? We were working in this morning.
There it is, right there, COVID-19.
No, it's a different.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I think it's this one. I believe so. I believe
It
it's.
looks better. Okay.
Okay, let me make this bigger so you guys can see it. There we go.
Okay, yeah. So what we did is we looked at the IMFA IEP, and now we're sending a prior written notice associated with the
Contingency.
thank you, contingency learning plan. So at the top, you can see that we just reconsidered these three areas: the special education related services, the appropriate educational placement, and then any additional changes, etc. So then we are considering a change of services, which we're asking consent for. And then you'll see a description in box number 1. So box number 1, while in the remote learning environment, IM will receive 30 minutes, 4 days a week of special education services and 20 minutes, 1 day a week of speech language services. Also, parent training will occur for 20 minutes one time in order to train parents in the universal features on the iPad, including text to speech. So that's what the student IM will need during associated with the contingency learning plan. Why the action is proposed or refused, this is actually something that I copied and pasted in there, and it should be familiar at this point because Donna's reviewed it, and it's at the top of the contingency plan. Why are we doing this? Well, and it illustrates that in number 2 here, which is the changes, etc., to the in the attached contingency learning plan are temporary and intended to meet the needs of, and I need to change that, IM, while in the learning environment selected by the parent educational decision maker. These temporary services will end upon the district's return to a normal schedule, and the services outlined in the original IEP dated, need to put that in, will resume as written without additional notice, meeting, or consent. So that's number 2. That should be standard for all of you. Number 3 Options considered and why rejected. Well, we did consider to continue the services as listed on the annual review, but rejected that because of the parents' selection of the learning environment for their students. So we considered that. The description of data, we had 3 sources of data to work with at this point. The annual review, the progress report, and of course, we always consider and use parental input, which we did heavily in this case because they selected the learning environment for their child. And then the last one, number 5, are other factors relevant to the proposal refusal. We covered this earlier in our file review section, and this is an area that we will always address and consider harmful effects associated with the placement, or consider the LRE or other areas that could be harmful for this student. In this particular circumstance, and this will not be a blanket statement that you would use for each child. This is specific to IM at this point. And we will work on examples for other grade levels so you can have a better idea of what potentially could work for your student. But because IM is receiving services in the remote learning environment, he will miss opportunities for socialization with peers, which could impact his mental health. All parents/educational decision makers in the school district were given learning environment options for their child or children. The safety implications of the pandemic outweigh the negative effects. So that is a sample of what harmful effects could look like, but they should be specific for each child. And then the rest of it is filled out as you normally would for a prior written notice.
Allison?
Yes.
Would you go back to that document just a minute and take a look? I want to point something out really quickly.
To the prior written notice?
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Here we are.
And I can't remember which number it was, but scroll down. Okay. Yeah, scroll down a little bit more. And then options considered and why the options were rejected.
Right here.
Yes, right there. This was rejected due to the parent educational decision maker selection of the learning environment for their student, or it could also read because the building schedule has changed as a result of the pandemic,
Or
something to that effect.
Students
Or
said
for
schedule,
safety.
yeah, safety concerns, building-wide schedule changes, any of those.
I just wanted to point that out because it may not always be the parent's choice as to why we're writing a contingency plan.
Sure.
Absolutely. Now I just got to get out of this screen.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
And again, we hope to have some examples like for your circumstances. So if your building if your contingency plan is in effect because of a change in schedule for your building, we hope to have an example or at least a model for you guys to use.
Okay. Did you want to look at any other forms in Brightsped?
I don't think so.
All right. Back to you, Donna.
Okay, after the dust settles. So you're going to be working, prioritizing on those whose learning environments have changed. You're going to do those first. Now, if a student's IEP is coming due in the month of September, you can do all this at that annual IEP meeting. Do the IEP as you would normally be doing in a normal environment, and then also do a contingency plan with an amendment, and then you can combine the prior written notice. So after you have those completed, the ones where the learning environment is changing, then you can start writing contingency plans for remote learning for the students who did not need an amendment because of their learning environment. And you'll just follow those same steps. What about annual reviews? Well, we are going to write the IEP as if we were in a normal pre-pandemic environment. You're going to include a contingency plan and use the same prior written notice and combine, as I just said. If the parent refuses the contingency plan, then you will use a separate prior written notice. But since we're involving the parent in the creation of a contingency plan, the likelihood that we'll refuse it is pretty slim. But it could happen. What about evaluations that were delayed? So your team may bring in students to complete evaluations that were delayed due to school building closure last spring. You would follow these rules. The evaluation is scheduled by appointment. A designated room would be available for assessments. Only the student may enter the building. The student's temperature is taken upon entry. Those conducting the assessments must wear a surgical mask and a face shield, and the student should wear a mask. If the student must see your face as you are working with that student, then we do have some window masks on order. They are not here yet, but you at least need to have a face shield and a plexiglass barrier between you and the student at the very minimum. Okay. What I'd like to do at this point in time is, when we did this Zoom meeting on the 18th of August, there were some questions that were in the chat. So I have worked on creating a document, a Q&A document from that chat. And I'm going to try to bring that up on my screen right now. Whoops. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Okay.
Ah, there it is.
All right. All right, so these are questions and answers from our PD that we provided on the 18th. So the first question, am I able to use the Individual Continuous Learning Plan, or ICLP, from last spring for my students who have chosen remote learning? The answer to that is the ICLP was created as part of the district's continuous learning plan for the emergency situation of school closure statewide by the governor. They are no longer in effect. The contingency plan form is new, and we have specific guidance on how to write them and what should be considered as they are written. Remote learning is being described as rigorous remote learning, and we need to make sure our special education services also match that description. We may want to request that some students come on site for some or all of their special education services, even though parent has chosen remote. Question 2, do I need to change all the start dates on my students' IEPs since our start date is different than the original school calendar? No, Mary changed all the start dates in each student's IEP record, so there's no need to go back through and do those. Question 3, if the student is in remote learning or has chosen Basehor Linwood Virtual School, is this considered a change in placement? No, since it is the parent choice and not an IEP team decision, it would not be considered a change in placement. What if the entire district has to move to remote learning? Would this be in change in placement? At that point, the district would be in a situation where health and safety are the top priority. Since everyone is moving to remote learning, it would be the same environment as general education students, and therefore not a change in placement. Question 5, what about a change in schedule, such as 4 days per week instead of 5, or 2 days in person and 3 remote? The answer to that is, I'm going to get an answer for you. I need to research this a little bit more, and we will get that information to you as soon as possible. In my mind, it does not, because the change in schedule is a district change in schedule for all students, but I just want to check to make sure I'm giving you the correct guidance. Question 6, if you can't provide the minutes of services written on the IEP because of circumstances due to COVID. What should I do? The answer to that is we want to keep our offer of FAPE to the student. So an amendment with a contingency plan and PWN or NOPA will be needed. Parent can choose an amendment with a meeting or without a meeting. If with a meeting, a 10-day notice must be provided to the parent. You may ask the parent if they will waive their right to the 10 days. The steps for the amendment are in the slideshow. Question 7, if I am able to provide virtual services all year, can I just amend the IEP to reflect that and not worry about a contingency plan? The answer to that is we really don't know what this year will bring. We could be on site 5 days per week with services as normal at some point during the year. Also, the current IEP is our offer of FAPE in person and on site, and we need to preserve that offer. Question 8, would we consider transportation for services for bringing students on site for specific services? The answer to that is we would likely pay the parent to transport if they request it, or provide transportation in the event parent can't transport. The time of services would have to be determined by the school and not parent convenience. Parent would not be able to enter the school. So what I'm saying there is if the parent asks for reimbursement, we would consider that request for reimbursement. We probably would indeed reimburse. And if we needed to provide transportation, we're going to have to make it at our convenience because of transportation conflicts that it might create, as well as when the teacher is available for those students to receive the services. Question 9. As IEPs come due, should we write it based on current circumstances or as if we were in pre-pandemic mode? The answer is you would write services based on in-person, on-site, pre-pandemic mode of instruction. Question 10, what is the timeline for amending IEPs to reflect current learning option? Remote plans for students who are currently on site. We realize this is a lot of work. We trust that you will work on these and have them in place as soon as you can, given the other duties that you have at the start of the school year. If the student's annual IEP is in September, just do the contingency plan as you write your annual IEP. Prioritize those IEPs that need to be changed due to learning option and schedule changes, unless a September annual IEP. Do those first. The lowest priority is creating a remote plan for students who did not need an amendment for schedule change or for learning option. Question 11, if a parent tells us they are homeschooling, do we still provide services? The answer to that is you should reach out and let parents know that they can bring their student in for services, but they would have to enroll in the district to be able to do so. They can enroll in the district and then at the school's convenience, bring their child in for services. We would not provide remote services to them, and we would not provide transportation. Question 12, what happens if a student does not show up for services, if they're in remote or the virtual school? The answer to that is let the parents know, let the building principal know, and make note in your documentation. Question 13, if the student has enrolled in Basehor-Linwood Virtual School, do I turn that case management over to the people that's providing that service if it is not me? The answer to that is the virtual school enrollment is for a semester at a time. The student may be returning to on-site or going to remote learning for second semester. The case management responsibilities still remain with the current case manager or provider. Question 14, we heard from Mr. Howard that if we are wearing a surgical mask and a face shield and one of our students tests positive for COVID, we will not need to quarantine. What if we are wearing a window mask or a window mask with a face shield? The answer to that is window masks are not considered as protective even with a face shield, so the provider would need to quarantine for 14 days. Question 15, would someone who has used DocHub please provide step-by-step instructions? And the answer to that is Melissa Bean did a screencastify and sent it to her SPED team. She will try to share it. And then also we are going to provide some information as well on how to use DocHub. Question 16, will we be required to move up reevaluations to prevent issues of completion in the event we all have to go remote? The answer to that is we're not going to require that. There is so much to do and think about currently, and we would not want to place that demand on our staff. If we go remote, we will still be able to evaluate remotely and or bring students into a controlled setting to evaluate. Question 17, is it possible to have someone help those of us from TMS who need to change blocks to change to block schedule? Absolutely. We have scheduled a time on 8/27 with TMS from 9 to noon. THS on 8/26 from 8:30 to 11:30 in the Chieftain Room. A TES session has not yet been scheduled as we are waiting to hear back from the administration. Question 18, do you have examples of the required paperwork for us? When will those be available? Jennifer and Allison worked on examples yesterday and are going to create a presentation to go with the examples. School psychologists will get this information in a Zoom or be able to view the presentation tomorrow, Friday, August 21st. And that is all the Q&As we have at this time. I'm sure there will be more, and I will add to those as we have questions.
Donna, will that be a shared document that people then can access?
Yes, that will be a shared document. Jennifer's question, if you didn't hear her because she's muted, her question was, will that be a shared document? And yes, I will share that with everyone.
Well, and you should expect in your email, if you're receiving this by email, there will also be a Google form for you to fill out that you will certify that you attended this training in person or that you viewed it remotely. And it'll have a place for you to put any follow-up questions that you have. And Donna, you stated that those did not have to be specific to this presentation, correct? They could just be questions about anything.
That is correct. It can be questions about instruction. It can be questions about paperwork, whatever it is that the person has a question about. And I'm going to share my screen with the survey that will be sent out with this email, and that has the Q&A and a link to this presentation. This is the survey that will go out. So you're going to indicate your email. You're going to certify that you attended the live session of the August 2020 Special Education PD, or that you viewed the recording, and that you have the following questions. So you can put your questions right on this form. And that is all we have for you today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.